Greetings, adventurers. Today I'm going to read to you from The Manual for the Art of Fencing According to Mathematical and Physical Principles by Dr. Wilhelm Roux, translated by Tobias Zimmermann. Dr. Johann Wilhelm Roux was not only a fencing master of the Kreuzler lineage, but also a professor of mathematics. As such, his manual attempts to look at fencing from a mathematical and physical point of view resulted in a well-structured book on Kreuzlerian thrust fencing. This translation by Tobias Zimmermann, the head of the Fechboden Zimmermann in Munich, Germany, is only the third source on Kreuzler-style smallsword available in English. It offers a detailed look at the common techniques all sources of this school share, and is of thus major interest to any practitioner of smallsword in general, and German smallsword in particular. Translator's Foreword. When talking about the Roux, there is no way around mentioning the Kreuzlers. Beginning with Wilhelm Kreuzler and his brother and son, all of whom taught fencing at the same time in Jena from about around 1620, the family kept producing fencing masters for generations. Their method, supposedly developed mainly by Wilhelm Kreuzler, earned praise and fame all across the German states of that period, and, according to Anton Friedrich Kahn, even in France. In spite of this fame, the last fencing master named Kreuzler was an adoptive son, Johann Wolfgang Bägelein Kreuzler, lived until 1780, though the family name lives on to this day. The Roux family, starting with Heinrich Friedrich Roux, 1728 to 1791, at first provost of Bägelein Kreuzler, then his successor, continued producing fencing masters up until Paul Roux, 1870 to 1935, the last fencing master employed by the University of Leipzig. Friedrich August Wilhelm Ludwig Roux, 1817 to 1897, played a crucial part in student fraternities, moving away from dueling with only thrusts to dueling using only cuts, which over time turned into the modern Mensa. Dr. Johann Wilhelm Roux's book, neither the first nor the last fencing manual written by a member of the Roux family, describes the Kreuzlern school of fencing in a very concise and bare-bones way. The entire common core of the Kreuzler syllabus is presented, but almost nothing deviating from or adding to that. So why translate this, of all sources, on German thrust fencing? For the very same reason. Since there is such a thing as a common core of techniques that all manuals of the Kreuzler lineage share, looking into just this set of techniques makes a lot of sense if you want to understand how the school works. On top of that, this text describes some of the more difficult techniques of the Kreuzler lineage more precisely than others do, since it makes the claim to present a scientific look at the matter. Whether this claim can actually be upheld is a different question, but there is definite value in Dr. Roux's efforts. It is noteworthy that the author outright condemns dueling in the foreword, and views fencing as a means of training the body, but also of preparing future officers for war. He goes on to praise the introduction of regimental fencing masters in the French army, an institution quite a few German manuals mention favorably. Curiously, there doesn't seem to be a volume 2 of Dr. Johann Wilhelm Roux's work, which would, in all probability, have contained cut fencing, but he did publish a book called The Connoisseur of Rifles, dealing with the ways to construct firearms more efficiently. Regarding the translation of technical terms, the Kreuzler tradition offers some specific problems. While many of them have widely accepted English counterpart describing the exact same thing, e.g. disengagement and durchgehen are identical, there are some which only sound like they'd be the same, and some that are unique. In an effort to make the text accessible without adapting terms from other systems that might give too specific an idea for a translation, as opposed to an interpretation, I have opted for the following ways of translating proper terms. 1. Widely known English counterparts, such as riposte, for example, used when the original German term does not hold additional meaning. 2. Literal translations of unambiguous German terms into English are used if the result is short and understandable. For instance, firm thrust. 3. Words which are used in some variation, but in different meaning in other systems, have been kept in their original German form. For instance, the German Terz is not the same as the French ties or Italian terza, so the hand positions remain untranslated. 4. Some of the typical proper terms of the system are puzzling, even for native speakers of German. For example, one type of parry in which you raise your arm and weapon is called a Verfaulen. This might be translated as falling into or falling back into, depending on the context. But since there's no way of telling why this rising movement has a name that suggests falling of all things, any translation I could give would be highly interpretive. I'm aware that German terms popping up here and there may disrupt the reading flow somewhat, but this compromise, which I have also made in my previous translation of August Fern's work, still seems like the most sensible solution to me. You can find each technical term with the translation used in the text, as well as the literal translation and an explanation in the glossary as well. If this translation of Dr. Ru's work inspires you to give the Kreuzler system a try, feel free to contact me if you have any question or insight, or just want to get in touch. Just search for Fechboden Zimmermann, and you should have no trouble finding me on the internet. If you happen to be in Australia, Fechschule Victoria offers an ongoing course on Kreuzler. If you're neither in Germany nor in Australia, you can find a series of introductory online classes at www.finedanceclasses.co.uk to get you started. Just search for Small Sword on the site. Thank you to Lucy Cousins for giving me a platform for these videos. Special thanks go out to Peter Frank of De Freifechter for checking my translation against the original, and to James Buchanan and Bao Hyun of Fechschule Victoria for offering a native speaker's perspectives. Their effort and input have added a lot to the quality of this translation. You guys rock. One final remark before the main text. I strongly believe that fencing must be open to anyone. In Dr. Ru's time, however, normally only men fenced, and the Page Institute where he taught was also male only, and thus the manual does not contain any female pronouns. In order to stay closer to the original, I have left them as they were. Manual for the Art of Fencing, presented according to mathematical and physical principles by Dr. Johann Wilhelm Rue, teacher of mathematics and fencing at the Pagan Institute in Gotha. First booklet containing the manual on thrust fencing, with 10 illustrations. Jena, at the Academic Bookstores Publishing, 1808. To the Highborn Lord Heinrich Julius, Count of Salish, His Countly Highness of Saxony-Gotha and Altenburg's highly decreed Chamberlain and High Cupbearer, humbly dedicated by the author. Highborn Lord Count, merciful Lord Chamberlain and High Cupbearer, I should not have dared to dedicate to your Highness, an expert in my art and in the mathematical sciences, this attempt to bring the art of fencing back to more solid foundations, were I not convinced of your Highness' merciful attitude in regards to my person, just as much as of your Highness's goodwill to judge this little work with leniency. I am far from believing that my work is deserving to be accorded by your high name, but since it has come into existence according to the measure of my capabilities, my heart urges me to use it as an opportunity to publicly show you the emotions of gratefulness I am imbued with since the time of my acceptance as instructor of the art of fencing at the Courtly Institute of Pages. In this attitude and with the deepest respect, I forever remain your Highness' obedient servant, Dr. Johann Wilhelm Rue, Countly Court Fencing Master of Gotha, Saxony. Preface. Were the art of fencing only a means to settle a so-called matter of honour, then I myself would find a manual on it amoral. However, this is no longer the current opinion on this matter, and rightfully so. As a gymnastic exercise, the art of fencing has received most just treatment. It has found eloquent and skillful defenders in public journals. For this reason, all the works in which it is described as a gymnastic exercise have been received with applause. I myself see it from another, additional point of view. To me, it is primarily a means of skillful defense in war, and thus an art, which is especially necessary for young people serving in the military. The officer needs to know how to skillfully use his sword and his saber. The good effects of this skill have primarily been visible in the recent past. The French army has performed miracles of bravery on foot and on horseback. And why? Because it has been taught to use its weapons well. It is known that, years ago already, the French emperor gave the order that a teacher of fencing be employed in each regiment, and that each soldier is to be trained with weapons by him, and how the same advantageous establishment has also come to be used in the military academies. This great monarch knew all too well that the fear of weapons is reduced by their more frequent sight, and that early exercise grants skill, and that with skill confidence in one's own strength increases, and that thus the personal courage which the warrior, in whose hands victory is placed, necessarily requires, grows. However, it is not this point of view on the art of fencing alone which has caused me to openly publish a manual on it. I have also tried my hardest to discuss more closely certain topics in thrust fencing, on which there have been varying opinions so far, and to return them to mathematical foundations, to the principle of the lever. Whether this small scientific work has turned out according to my aims is for experts to decide, whose reprimands I shall accept gratefully where I have failed. One. As long as the art of fencing's only aim was the enemy's demise, it was called the art of duelling, and only nobles and officers visited the public fencing schools. Nowadays, that the art has further advanced, however, and is perceived as a gymnastic art. Without taking the small sword into consideration, it is called the art of deflecting the opponent's thrusts, and to combine this with riposting according to a predetermined plan. What according to a predetermined plan means can only become clear later in the text. 2. Position, figure 1 and 2, is the stance of the body that enables a good defense, including the good position of the arm and blade. Their requirements for such are as follows. 1. Set both feet on a straight line towards the opponent at a distance of 1 or 1.5 feet. Do this in such a way that the tip of the right shoe points at the opponent, and the tip of the left shoe somewhat outward, however. After this, bend both knees, the left one more than the right one, to be precise, so that the entire weight of the body rests more on the left than on the right foot. Pull the left shoulder back, bring the right one, however, forward so far that the thus retracted lower body is well covered. Your left hand, which is placed forward during some parries and thrusts, rests on your chest. Your right arm, however, is kept in a position neither completely extended nor bent, so that your chest is well covered by your fist. An instrument which is used partially for thrusting, partially for deflecting the opponent's thrust, is called the small sword in a serious fight here. However, it is the foil. Here, however, it is the foil. The latter consists of a blade about 32 inches long without the tang, and of the hilt. This in turn consists of a handle and a dish connected to a crossguard. The grip of a foil, or a small sword, must rest firmly in your hand, but in such a way that all movements can be performed with ease. In order to accomplish this, put your index finger along one side of the crossguard, and place the thumb on its other side at a right angle, on the inside part of the dish. The different motions of the fist, which are used in part for parrying and in part for thrusting, are: second, a motion in which the knuckles of the hand are up and the fingers down. It is a very weak motion, in which for this reason all parries can be pushed through more easily than other motions. Terce, a motion that is different from second only in the hand coming to the rest lower than the blade, with the arm creating almost a right angle with the blade. Quarte. This is a completely opposite motion to second, regarding its weakness as well as its position. It is taken when the knuckles of the hand are down and the fingers up. Half terce, half quarte. I shall completely omit the explanation of this motion, which is already included in its name. For brevity's sake, however, I shall from here on address this motion as half quarte. Among the motions named above, half quarte, with the blade directed at the opponent's face, is certainly the safest and most comfortable guard for free fencing. Some prefer an extended second, others a quarte, with the arm retracted on the right side. The former is not to be recommended during the opening for second under the arm and due to the danger of a thrust of a terce it brings. The latter, however, cannot be recommended due to the danger of a fleeting inner quarte in close measure, which is hard to avoid in this situation. I hardly need to remind you that the division of the blade is a matter which deserves special consideration in the art of fencing. Normally, the blade is divided into 4 equal parts, namely the full strong, the half strong, as well as the full weak and the half weak. Every more detailed division of the blade is rightfully regarded as unnecessary. For if you wanted to divide the blade into 8 equal parts, for example, 8 such parts would make matters more complicated than 4 of them. Even though our force would increase or decrease by almost a pound, if the blades touch 1/8 of their lengths closer towards the hilt, we still keep the division of the blade into 4 parts, since it is easier to deal with a blade that has 4 parts than with one that has 8 parts. There is also a division between the inner and outer part of the blade. You have contact on the former if your blade is bound by the opponent's blade on your left, and on the opponent's right side, and you have contact on the latter if your blade is bound by the opponent on your right and your opponent's left side. The art of fencing as such is based upon 2 mathematical teachings. Thrust fencing is based upon the teaching of the lever, and cut fencing is based upon the teaching of the pendulum. The former is to be discussed here. As is commonly known, the human arm is to be seen as a lever, along which a certain force spreads, which changes at every moment the muscles exert or contract. If you extend the arm horizontally in the motion of quarte, and look only at the force that acts at the right angle towards a straight line, which you can imagine from your fist to your shoulder, the relevant point of support can be found where the upper arm is connected to the shoulder. If you, for example, apply a weight at the wrist, just as heavy as can be supported in this extended position of the arm, you will not be able to bear more than twice this weight in the area of the elbow or the middle of the arm. The closer you move towards the shoulder with this, however, the heavier the weight can bear to be, until it becomes infinite at the shoulder point. If thus the weight that balances the strength of the shoulder of a human being is surpassed, there can be no further analysis. Since, however, the strength of the fist grows as the arm is retracted, and rises in the same relocation as the distance between the fist and the shoulder point shrinks, the forces of 2 equally sized and equally strong opponents have to act relatively to the distance of their respective fists from the shoulder point, if the positions of their arms are different. I'm going to stop there. I recommend this book. If you're still awake and you're still with me, I think that the mathematical breakdown of fencing is of great benefit, and there are figures and pictures. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed hearing a little bit about German thrust fencing of the Kreisler tradition. This book is available online. I will post the link. Thanks for tuning in. I hope to see you again.